Some say Yanmar, some even say TYM. We're going to try to answer that question today. Who makes John Deere compact tractors? In addition to that question, we're going to try to go into maybe a little bit of a history. Why maybe some people think different thoughts, because yeah, things have changed over time. This one's not going to be easy. Let's get started. One thing I usually hear from Kubota fans, which is meant as a derogatory statement toward John Deere, usually they'll say, Kubota's 100% Kubota from end to end. Well, that's not true, and I don't mean to be negative about that. That's just the way it is. None of these tractors have all of their components 100% end-to-end made in-house by their manufacturers. Not even close, and that wouldn't make any sense. And that's not a bad thing, folks. That's just the way it is. For instance, the single point connectors, right here on the Deeres, they say Faster right on the side of them. And we have a good relationship with Faster, so we understand some of the background of that. Yes, the 2 Series has a Faster connector. The combines from all the major manufacturers have Faster connectors on them for hydraulics and electrical connections. On the Kubota, the single point connectors are made by Parker, another manufacturer, but again, not Kubota. On the Deere machines, the hoses are made by Gates. Deere doesn't make their own hoses. They don't make their own couplers. Faster makes some of the regular hydraulic couplers. I don't know who makes the hoses for Kubota, but I'm fairly certain that Kubota is not in the hose business, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So it's not unusual for a company to outsource some of their parts. In fact, it makes perfect sense, right? These companies can focus on those parts and do a good job of making those parts. So when we're talking about who makes a tractor, we have to get some definitions and some general understandings right. I really would define it myself as who designs the tractor, okay? It's not so much about who molds the steel or cuts the steel to me as it is about who does the design, who owns that design, and who is maintaining it, who's making changes to it going forward. I think that's the important part to me. And yet I see how we could take these definitions and change them just a little bit to make things look better or worse. If we take the definition to the other extreme and say it's whoever puts the parts together, then it's easy to say that John Deere makes all of their tractors. All of the John Deere tractors are assembled in a John Deere plant. Many of them in different places all over the world, but to my knowledge, every John Deere tractor is assembled in a John Deere plant. But that in itself doesn't mean that John Deere designs all of its tractors. So let's start with the modern history, I'll call it, of John Deere compact tractors. We're not trying to catalog the entire history of John Deere compact tractors. Rather, we're just wanting to mention key points throughout that history. This would be the 50 series line. I believe the 850 and 950 came out in 1978, and the 650 and 750 came out in 1981. So that completed the 50 series line. There was a 1050 all the way up to 1250. I'm not sure about those, right? But the 6 through the 9 came out sometime between 78 and 81. Those were pure Yanmar tractors. So the folks that say Yanmar makes John Deere tractors, most likely this is where they got their information, right? Was in the late 70s, early 80s, for extended periods of time, as we'll get to, Yanmar makes the tractors. Now, in that case, not only did they build the tractors in their own plant, they owned the designs. The 50 series was followed by the 70 series, the 670, 770, all the way up to 1070 and beyond. Still made by Yanmar. Followed again by the 90 series, again made by Yanmar. Now, there was a tractor that started in 1986, the 55 series, okay? You may have seen us talk about it. Dirt Perfect has been here with his 655. We've been around Neil at Dig Drive DIY. He's got a 755. Wonderful machines. Those, to my knowledge, are the first compact, or you might even say subcompact in the case of the 655, tractors that were built by Deere in the USA. Those were built in Horicon, Wisconsin. They were manufactured from the mid-80s sometime. 86 comes to mind. It may even be earlier than that. all the way up till the mid-90s. It really lasted quite some time. But they phased those tractors out and they actually went back with the 4000 series. This would be 4100, 4200, 43, all the way up to 46 or 4700, which were Yanmar designs, okay? And those Yanmar designs, if you look at, say, tractordata.com, it will say that they were built in or assembled in Augusta, Georgia. So this is where things begin to get muddy. Who made those tractors? Well, if you use the definition that I like to use, which is who designed the tractors, well, Yanmar did. If you use a looser definition to say who assembled it, well, John Deere did, right? So you can see a little bit of a transition beginning to happen, that John Deere is seeing that the compact tractor world is something they really do want to invest in. They've actually built a factory in Augusta and they're beginning to do some of their own assembly, maybe a lot of their own assembly. I don't know how much at that time. I'm on the 3046R right now. The 3R series was derived from the 3X20 series, the 3320, 3520, 3720. You've seen a lot of our 3520 in recent episodes, as well as my dad's 3320. The 20 series came out in about 2005, I believe, maybe 2006, I'm not exactly sure. The 20 series is the first Deere-designed compact tractor of this modern era. And you can see the differences in that tractor. You can see that it's a dramatic departure from those Yanmar tractors when you look close. So that's really the first step in Deere beginning to take over the design of the tractors, not just the manufacturing like they did in the 4000 series. Next up was the 1 series, yeah? The 1026R in about 2011, maybe 2012. And it only stayed out for a year or so, but that's a Deere design. It took over from the 2305, which was the last Yanmar subcompact design in the Deere fleet. The 1 series, again, you can see pretty radical changes from the 2305. It's a lot different tractor. It has the auto connect deck, has a lot more advanced features, and you can just see that it's a step deeper into the engineering design process than was the 2305 and the earlier Yanmars. So at that stage we had the 1 series and the 3R series designed and built by Deere. And I'm not sure when the 3E series came out, but it was a little bit after the 1 series. The last holdout tractor in the Yanmar line was the first generation 2025R and 2032R. Our neighbor has one of those 2032Rs today. Fine tractors. They were built until sometime around 2016, maybe early 2017, they were still building those tractors. At that point, Deere introduced the 2032 and 2038R tractors. Again, radically different from the earlier 2R tractors. I've left out the 4 series here. It fits essentially with the 3R. Right? The 4R redesign happened at the same time as the 3R. I was trying to keep it focused here on the 1s and 2s and 3s, the smallest ones, but this same applies to that 4M, 4R series. So at this point, 2017, Deere has designed replacements for all of the Yanmar line, and all tractors in the Deere compact tractor lineup are Deere designs, designed by Deere engineers, built in Deere factories. If that were the end of the story, this would be an easy video, right? But for some reason, which I don't fully understand, right? I don't claim to have all the marketing understanding necessary, but Deere decided to introduce the 3D series of tractor. That would be the 3025, the 3035D, and the 3043D tractors. I guess calling them 3D tractors is kind of, well, all tractors are 3D, right? They're not two-dimensional. But anyway, 3D tractors, my understanding is this is a Yanmar design. Now, they are built by Deere in India, but it is a Yanmar design from my understanding. It is not a Deere-designed tractor. I don't know if that's going to change in the future. I don't know if we'll see what I would consider an entry-level gear drive tractor that will be Deere design in the future. Was this just a stopgap, or is this a long-term type approach? I really don't have any answer on that, nor do I have any way to find out any more information. Now, we've been to Augusta twice. The first time, you've seen videos from that if you've been a part of our channel for a while. We got excellent tours of the factory, the 1 Series all the way up through the 4 Series. We got to see the assembly. We went through that and even talked about the sourcing of a lot of the parts, where they came from, who made them. So we feel like the video, specifically on the subcompacts, on the 1 Series, is a good one for you to go see and get a feel for where some of these major parts come from, as well as how much of the work is done in the US. But in a sense, that's not the point that I would like to talk about here in this episode. I'm more interested in talking about who designs, who makes the design decisions on the John Deere tractors. And that's what we learned in our second trip. We were invited to Augusta for a special session. I can't go into a huge amount of detail on it because they made me sign a bunch of paperwork that I wouldn't say anything about the details we were talking about. But what I did meet were 200 or so of highly passionate engineers, both development engineers, quality engineers. There was hardly any marketing people there. This was all product people, right? These were people that are responsible for the designs. Yeah, they really are the people that a lot of you guys are saying bad things about in the comments. You know, how can an engineer ever do that? Well, I met them. I don't know that I still know the answer to that question. But anyway, these people are in tune with how we use our tractors here in the West. And we think that's an important feature. So when it comes time to think about who makes the tractors, from my standpoint, I'm concerned about who's designing that tractor, who's making the design decisions. And in this case, I know that there's a huge staff, not only here in the US, although there's a huge amount here in the US, there's a bunch of engineers around the world that are participating and working towards these designs. For example, we met the loader team at the recent National Farm Machinery Show. Yeah, they were walking around a bit incognito, but they walked up and introduced themselves. And yes, that's loaders made and largely designed, at least for the small ones, in Mexico. We met more of the loader team when we were in Augusta. So there's a mixture. There's some in Mexico, there's some in Augusta. Who knows where the rest of it's placed? But what I can say is they're in John Deere, right? They're employed by John Deere. John Deere is making the design decisions. You've heard us talk about this standard concept, the ASABE, American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers. They've created a set of standards for all size tractors, right? And we've talked about the distance between the drawbar and the PTO and the like. This is a constraint that John Deere engineers keep first priority. I mean, I mentioned several different things of, hey, why don't we change this? Why don't we change that? And a lot of times I would see hesitation based on that standard. I saw that as a good thing. I didn't see that as a negative thing at all, because what we've experienced from some of the other manufacturers is that they don't pay attention to that standard. They just kind of build whatever they want to build, and yeah, most of the time that works pretty well, and other times, yeah, it presents challenges. But Tim, what about that Yanmar engine? It's not made by John Deere. That's right. The engines in all of the 1, 2, 3, 4s are not made by John Deere. But by the time we get to the 5 Series, yes, they are John Deere's at that point. I don't understand that argument, quite frankly. The Yanmar engine has been incredibly reliable. The partnership with John Deere is very deep. There's even some joint ownership on some of the transaxles in the 1 Series. I know that the transaxle we talk about in that other video, where there's a 50-50 joint venture, I believe, with Yanmar. It's called Transaxles of America or something like that. So the partnership is long and deep with Yanmar. One of the main reasons to talk about, well, who makes this and who makes that, is parts availability. And for me, I see that there's probably been many hundreds of thousands of these tractors right here shipped with these same engines. I would wager you lunch, or even more, that we'll be able to get parts for this engine until Christ comes back again, or until all of us that are watching this video are dead and gone. I mean, I don't see any way that we'll have trouble getting parts for these engines. If we do, it'll be a bigger issue than simply a disagreement between Yanmar and Deere. I mean, there's just so much installed base out there. I don't see that being an issue. Especially when I look back at some of the old Oliver tractors that my family has, we're still able to get rings and pistons and head gaskets. Of course, you need a lot of head gaskets for the old Olivers. Yeah, that's right. But anyway, we're able to get those necessary parts even still today through AGCO. That's not even John Deere. That's just saying that a lot of these parts remain available for a long time when there's a large install base and when you're working with a reliable, long-term manufacturer. Now, I mentioned TYM in the introduction. Yeah, I've got several comments over the last few years saying that TYM makes some John Deere tractors. So I did some digging on this, and the first thing I found when searching online was this website right here. At first, I didn't know what I was looking at. It says something, it's on a TYM page here, and it talks about John Deere. It's even got a picture of John Deere 6 Series tractors, right? But if I look close, I see that this is a Korean website. It says so in a couple places here, and it talks about Korean imports. Well, I asked my John Deere contacts about this, and they confirmed that TYM imports the 6 Series tractor from Mannheim, Germany, where all the 6 Series are made. And TYM is an importer. Apparently Yanmar is an importer, and there's one other one that's an importer as well into South Korea. I don't really understand why. That's above my knowledge base here. But apparently it's easier for them to sell through, and they are sold as John Deere tractors. It's quite interesting. They say TYM John Deere in the website, and then the tractor itself is a John Deere 6 Series tractor, green, yellow, says John Deere all over it. So that is all I found online. From everything I can see, TYM doesn't make any tractors for John Deere. If you've got any different evidence, I'd be happy to hear it. Put it in the comments section below. Now, just saying, oh, I heard from, somebody's uncle that worked for John Deere 20 years ago. No, provide us a source. Help us. We need somebody that'll go on camera to help inform us all, right? We're in search of the truth here, but to my knowledge, there is no John Deere tractors made by TYM. So in summary, all of our research leads me to the 1 Series, 2 Series, 3E, 3R, 4M, 4R, 5E, 5M, 5R, all being made and designed by John Deere. The only exception is the 3D series, which, although it's built by John Deere, is a Yanmar design. Now, while we've done our best to provide factual information in this episode, it's entirely possible that we don't know all the facts. I've done what I can to learn about this history, to learn about the present situation. If there's anything that changes, I'm going to put it in the pinned comment and in the description below. So if you have any questions about this and you think, hey, maybe he's already corrected it, well, look in the pinned comment or in the description, and we will state any errors that we've encountered, any misstatements that we've made. Again, it's not our intent to be misleading at all. We feel like no one's really diving into these questions, and that's why we've addressed them on TYM. That's why we have addressed them on Mahindra and now John Deere. I think maybe we have one more episode we're going to go to. It won't be on a specific manufacturer, but we got one more episode on this general topic, and then we'll move on to something else. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on Tractor Time with Tim. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. Come on, Bullseye. And Bullseye was made in the USA on the farm in Southern Illinois, along with about 100 others. Yeah, they're not doing anything to control cat population there. He used to be really nervous about being held and walked around with and stuff. He don't seem to care anymore. It's kind of like, you just keep scratching me, I'll just keep laying here limp.